This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to an incredibly important episode of Coffee with Kenobi. This is the long-anticipated, spoiler-filled review of The Rise of Skywalker, Episode 9. We have finally made it, everybody. I can't believe it. With a show this big, you've got to bring in the entire Coffee with Kenobi family. Routinely, these shows are the biggest shows because we're reviewing the brand new Star Wars. Plus, we get the most voices on here, and you really can't get more of an all-star cast in Star Wars fandom. So let's bring in everybody's going to be joining me on the show today. First, our Coffee with Kenobi media specialist, Lisa Dullard.
Hello.
Hello. And you're excited to be on, aren't you?
I'm thrilled.
Good. Hey, I'm happy to have you on. You've never been on one of these review shows, have you?
No, I haven't.
Oh, cool. That's why I'm looking forward to your thoughts for sure. Also joining us on the show today is the creator of Legends Library, Randy Therio.
Hey, Dan. Hi, Lisa. Welcome to our conversation, and welcome everybody else. Can't wait to talk Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of hot takes on this thing, and that's why we bring in our Comics with Kenobi duo, Jeff McGee and Matt Moore. Hello, guys.
Oh, we don't get our own intros, Matt. It's two of us together. So you go first, then I'll go.
I thought we were going to be talking about the new Jumanji movie. I'm not prepared.
Well, we can. That's the spinoff. That's the big announcement.
But I haven't seen that one yet. You're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
I love it. Hey, you were a co-host for a while when Cory went back to school.
This is true. When Cory was bettering himself and then decided to come back for some reason.
Yes.
I filled in.
Fourth grade is always the hardest grade.
Also joining us, you guys are always hard to top, so that's why we sandwich you in the middle. Also joining us on the show, the host of Resistance Reactions, Aaron Harris and Dave Motters.
Well, hello, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
This.
Oh, sorry, Aaron. You and I are usually talking together anyways, right?
That's about right. So, but this is going to be fun. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having us on, Dan.
Of course. Now we will bring in the co-creator of Coffee with Kenobi, Cory Clubb.
Hey, guys. Glad to be here. Excited to talk to everybody. And it's always a good time with everybody on here and sharing our thoughts on the new Skywalker movie. So here we go. And then rounding out our all-star cast is your CWK newsman, Tom Gross.
Well, hello, everybody. It's great to... Wow, I look at the names on this list, and man, I am honored to be a part of everybody here, with everybody here.
I'm just happy I get to speak with all of you. I mean, if we lived closer, we would undoubtedly have seen this movie together for the first time in the same theater. And so this is close to that because we're going to get to share our thoughts. And we're going to start with our overall thoughts on the movie, you know, how we felt about it, if we liked it, all that good stuff. So, Lisa, why don't you kick off the show for us? What are your overall thoughts on The Rise of Skywalker?
Oh, no pressure at all. Kicking off the show. Uh-oh. All right. Well, first of all, my overall impressions of the film and my thoughts and feelings and everything else, I really love this movie. It's not perfect, but I found it to be satisfying. When I came home on my ride home from Thursday night, I went to one of the fan events, and driving home, I was a little overwhelmed because there was so much to take in with the film. But then I went to go see it yesterday morning, and it was like a whole different experience. It feels like the movie slowed down a little bit. I was able to absorb a lot more, and I was able to deal with some things that, you know, it wasn't a big fan of the first time I watched it. Everything felt much better the second time I watched it. I really love it. It like I said, it's not perfect, but it felt like a Star Wars film, and it made me happy.
So the first time you saw it, you weren't as sure about it? Is that what you said?
I was, because there was just so much to take in. It just felt like, I think on Twitter I said that it was frenetic. It was just, I felt like my eyes were just darting all over the screen, like, whoa, slow down.
Your brain was light speed skipping.
yeah, exactly. And my first impression, I still love the film. I didn't walk out thinking, that I wasn't sure about it. But I wasn't, it's like, boy, what did I just watch? There was a whole lot of stuff going on. But the second view, it does benefit from multiple viewings. And I'm going to go see it again tomorrow. And you feel like you settle into it a little bit more when you've seen it more than once.
Right. You like when you know what to expect.
Right.
Randy, what about you?
Well, I loved the movie. I too was pretty shocked by the pace and the rate by which we were jumping from plot line to plot line. And I felt like I've heard a lot of people, say the word satisfying. I was so satisfied with like the amount of story I was getting. I felt like I was getting my money's worth as far as like just jumping from system to system and from storyline to storyline, character to character. There was especially that first, that first maybe 30 minutes or so. We're so used to getting that, that big intro, like Last Jedi with the bombers, or the Episode 3, Another Happy Landing. We're used to getting those big long intros, and this one was a little bit different, where it's just like almost like a collage of this is where we're at. And so I was super super excited because it matched my excitement. The pace matched my excitement of being there, and it matched my excitement as to what I was looking at, what I was watching, and here's all the questions I had, but I don't even remember the questions because now I have new ones in the first 10 minutes. So it was a ride, and it was great. I loved it. So I watched it on Thursday. Friday morning, watched The Force Awakens again with my family, and then went right back and saw the movie, The Rise of Skywalker again. And it actually made the both movies better, which I know, Dan, you might be saying, Force Awakens is a perfect movie. I've heard you say that.
I've softened my stance a little bit and modified that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the Rise of Skywalker adds more gravity to the other movies. And I have more thoughts on that I'll share later. But my initial thoughts are, I loved it. I loved this movie.
Very good. Jeff, what about you?
Well, my initial 3-word review when I left after seeing it the first time was, I am satisfied.
You texted me that too, I believe.
Yeah, and that was it. That's all I would tell anybody. I said, I am satisfied. Like Lisa said, it's not perfect. I did have some issues with it, which we'll talk about a bit later. But jumping off of what Randy said, it felt less like a film and more like a greatest hits compilation, a Star Wars greatest hits, which wasn't a bad thing. By the end of the film, I was right along with it. It was pulling me. I was getting pulled along right along with it. I did enjoy it very much. I did see it twice. Saw it once 2D, then went to the next day to see it in IMAX 3D, which was a bit overwhelming. But the conversion, the post conversion job they did is stellar, which it has been on all 3 of them. But the thing that surprised me the most was when Palpatine told Rey, "I am the Sith." I didn't expect her to respond with, "And I am Iron Man."
That was a little surprising.
It was surprising. It zigged when I thought it was going to zag. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I thought it was a very satisfying conclusion to the story, and to this particular trilogy, it was it felt like more of the same, and I mean that in a good way.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Matt, what about you?
I left my first showing of The Rise of Skywalker feeling the exact same way I felt when I left my first showing of Star Wars back in the 1970s. I was just exhilarated and thrilled and completely blown away by everything I saw. And then when I saw it a second time, very early in the morning at 4 a.m., because we had a theater that was running it 24/7. I emerged from the theater with an enormous cup of coffee, and I was still resolutely satisfied with the film. I thought it was a great way to cap off the 9-film series. As for capping off the sequel trilogy, I think it now was lacking a little bit. So in some ways, nothing so much that it was a detriment. But I do believe that the film, while it had a great, solid, kinetic pace, it did feel a tad rushed, I thought, and they crammed a whole lot in there. But at the same time, it's get money's worth. So, but I'm not here to complain because it was a new Star Wars movie. That's one I've literally been waiting for 42 years. So, and I couldn't have done it any better. And I doubt anybody else could have done it any better. So overall, I like it. It's got a good beat, and you can dance to it.
Very nice. Nicely done. Okay, I'm liking this so far. We're only halfway through, and we've already got some varied opinions, which is what I think makes this conversation fascinating. Aaron, I saw some of your posts on Facebook. Tell us what you thought about the movie.
Well, I tell you, I walked out of that theater. I was fortunate enough to see it with David and with our friend Jason Brame, and I walked out of that theater. Actually, the movie went off. I literally sat there in the theater, just trying to catch my mind up to what I had just saw. I absolutely loved it. I thought the pacing. I know a lot of friends I've talked to talk about the pace. It was accelerated. It was too fast. It was too choppy. It was all over the place. For me, it wasn't. Mainly because I'm used to seeing a whole bunch of story crammed into a 22-minute TV show and having to analyze it over an hour and a half. So the pace didn't bother me because I was able to soak it in because that's what I'm used to taking in. So, but to me, there was very little about this movie I did not like. The soundtrack to me was off the chain. Everything about it just moved. And I was literally up 3/4 of the night after that, just on a high that I can't say I've ever been on for a Star Wars movie. It was incredible. And I absolutely loved it.
That's great news. Dave, what about you? It's cool that you guys all got to see it together. I saw it with Tom and Cory. What did you think of it, Dave?
Yeah, you felt like you were shot out of a gun. I know Aaron was and Jason was as well. I was just I put a few words down, just thankful that I'm still getting new Star Wars after 42 years, like Matt said. I was 8 years old back then. I'm 50 years old now. And to still be getting, like I thought about it earlier today, Luke, Han, and Leia on the silver screen, still, the three of them. I can't believe it. And the job they did with that. So very thankful. I think also, I wrote down the word bittersweet. I'm sad that at least I guess the Skywalker saga line is over. I don't know, although I know you mentioned it the other day, Dan, maybe Kathleen is changing her stance on that a little bit on the blue carpet, not the red carpet, but the blue carpet. And I think they're going to leave it open as a possibility in time, but it makes me sad if we don't see them anymore. But I also understand that it is time to wrap that part up and really get on to new stories and new parts of the galaxy. And, so overall, just really thankful for another Star Wars movie. It does feel bittersweet, but overall satisfied and excited to see what they do next.
Great. Cory, what about you?
Yeah, this, as we've been talking about, this is a movie I think will live with Star Wars fans for a long time, regardless of what you've come in with or come away with. I think it's interesting in filmmaking altogether. I think it sets a bar from one of the things they use. And I realized Star Wars can still surprise me when I least expect it, but also make me fall in love again with it. This film alone is going to be thought on for a long time, I think, with fans, with new viewers. But for me, I did enjoy it. It was a blast to see in the theater with my friends, and then I even liked it more, even still, seeing it with my boys the very next day. And I realized the two things different between those was the first time seeing it, I analyzed it with my friends and talked and had a good time. The second one with my boys, I realized that I have to be almost a child again to really understand Star Wars. Having been an adult now and take it in a different lens, that sometimes you forget that you have to sit back and relax and enjoy a fun space adventure film for what it is. And this is it. I think this film does a great job of getting through to fun, adventure, action, and comedy, and some romance. But I think there's also something that will expand this series even for years to come. So a lot more to say, I think, as we get into discussion, but that's what I think.
Very good. Tom, what are your overall thoughts? I know you've seen it. You've seen it the one time, right?
That's right. And that's what I was going to start with. It sounds like everyone has seen it multiple times, and I have only seen it once. And so I've let it marinate in my thought. And the fact that I've only seen it once is not a commentary at all. It's just I have not taken any opportunities to go see it again, which I do plan to. But so as my mind is marinated on it, I've discussed with you and you, Dan, and Cory several times, and other friends. My assessment at this point is that I absolutely, positively love this movie. I've heard many times, and a couple of you have said, it's not the perfect movie. And I guess my expectation going into this movie was that I didn't have expectations. I really tried to force myself to not look too far ahead. In fact, after The Last Jedi, which until last weekend I had only seen once, I remember at the end of Last Jedi, I thought, what do I really want to know? And there wasn't a whole lot. And so I tried to go into this one without too many expectations, and I didn't expect perfection. I expected to be entertained, and that's exactly what I was. And as Cory will attest, as he sat 2 seats away from me, I was on the edge of my seat, and I'd sit back and settle in, and I was on the edge of my seat, and I was back and forth, and I think I started applause twice, maybe 3 times in our theater, as well as I think something like that once or twice. And quite frankly, I was thoroughly entertained with this as much as I was back in 1977 when I was 7 years old.
Which is similar to what Ed Matt had said, too. My brother told me that this is the best he's felt about a Star Wars movie since he saw The Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
Which is great. So full disclosure, when I was seeing the movie on Thursday, it was me and my family. We're in one row, and then behind me were Tom and Cory and my friend Scott, and then my mom and my brother and his daughter, and we'd had the best time. When I knew there were key moments that were going to happen, I would turn around to see Tom and Cory's faces, and their mouths were both agape, as I'm sure all of yours were during this incredible experience. So of course, I saw it on Monday, then I saw it on Thursday, then I saw it on Friday, and I can legitimately say that I felt the exact same every single time that I saw it. I really, really like it. I think it's fun. I think it's engaging. I think it's far from perfect. And I think there are certain things that are not being unresolved with me as I think about this thing and try to process it out loud. But what I like about it is that, well, there are a lot of key moments I think that are really important. There are a lot of key things I think are perhaps misses or missteps. But we're going to get into all that stuff. So let's just transition back to the top of this. Lisa, we all know that you are the world's biggest solo A Star Wars Story fan.
Yes.
But what I want to know, just consider The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. Where does this movie rank for you among the new trilogy? And tell me why.
I would say that currently, having seen it twice, because obviously I've seen The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi more, but I would say The Rise of Skywalker is probably my favorite of this sequel trilogy. And something else I noticed when I was thinking about that was with each trilogy, the original trilogy, the prequels, and now the sequels, the third movie is always my favorite. So I don't know if that's because I just like resolution. It's like this, because Return of the Jedi is my favorite of the original trilogy. Revenge of the Sith is my favorite of the prequels, and now The Rise of Skywalker is my favorite here. So I don't know if I just have an affinity for now the story's told. So that could be why I'm gravitating toward The Rise of Skywalker as my favorite of the sequel trilogy. But there were also some things in there that I really enjoyed more so than the other two films. There were things that I enjoyed in the first two films that I enjoyed even more with The Rise of Skywalker. Of this trilogy, my favorite character has been Kylo Ren / Ben Solo, or Kylo Ben, as I sometimes call him. And so I've been drawn through these three films to his story, and to see how it was culminated quite beautifully in The Rise of Skywalker, I found very satisfying. And then there were other things that I really enjoyed about it. I enjoyed Poe, Finn, and Rey. I liked the three of them together. I kind of wish that we had seen the three of them together a little bit more, in the other films, because I think the three of them had really nice chemistry together. So that was fun. There were some really great Chewbacca moments that I really enjoyed. I thought 3PO was fantastic. Some of the new characters, I love little Dio, that cute little droid. He's adorable. I liked Zori Bliss quite a bit. So there was a lot in this that I really enjoyed. It all sort of landed. Those things landed well for me for this film.
I'm glad to hear that it was your favorite one. And I wasn't sure what you were going to say based on what you were saying online. So that's very, very cool.
Yeah, see, I'm very surprising. I'm
A
unpredictable.
woman of mystery.
That's right.
Yes, that's great. Randy, what about you? Where does this rank for you among the sequel trilogy?
It's first. It's my favorite out of the three. But I'm willing to admit that it's because it's the most recent. Having done a few of these with all of y'all, I'm willing to admit that I'm a pretty easy sell, and I'm okay with that. Like if I was in denial or whatever, then you guys could, kind of talk me off the ledge there. But I'm willing to admit that I'm a pretty easy sell, and so because it's Star Wars, the newest thing always gets me the most excited. I'll probably have a more analytical and intelligent take on it, years from now when I've seen, all three of these, with a little bit more frequency, or at least this one with a little bit equal screen time. But I really like this movie. I love the journey and the emotional, the emotional roller coaster. I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose. Really, that's what it was. It's just like, it was just coming at such a quick pace, and I was just having so much fun and being entertained. I think Tom, that's what Tom had said. I kind of relate to that. I was fully entertained. Would even go as far as to say, like, taking these three, this trilogy. Wow, I'm going to say it, and this is going to probably be. Don't send emails. But let me just say this that this trilogy was, as it turns out, we're thinking, well, maybe this was going to be the redemption of Ben Solo. And as it turns out, this trilogy was really the redemption of Rey, and we didn't know that we wanted that redemption until this movie. And then when we got it, it was really special. And I'll share more on that when we kind of break down the movie a little bit. But
sure.
With Vader, I didn't know that I wanted him redeemed. I wanted it because Luke wanted it. But with Rey, with Rey being redeemed, and a character that we have all been so endeared to, and just Daisy Ridley as an actress, and just how charming she is on screen, to see her and to see Rey be somewhat redeemed, or to be redeemed, is super satisfying. And I would say that's more satisfying than seeing Vader redeemed, who destroyed planets. So I'm again, I'm very guilty of the thing that's in front of me is my favorite, but right now I'm kind of ranking this trilogy above the original trilogy.
Whoa.
And I know that's
great.
That's
I'm glad that it moved you.
Yeah, it did. And there's more. I'll share it, but I want to be short. I want to respect everyone else's time too. But yeah, I love the movie. So
wonderful. Okay, so there we go. We've got the two of you say it's your favorite one. Jeff, where do you stand on this?
Well, again, this is subject to change at any point because I'm still digesting everything. But as it stands right now, I would say it's my second favorite of the new trilogy. The Last Jedi is my favorite and will probably remain my favorite because I just think it's a beautiful film, and the themes that were presented in it and the direction of it, it just felt more like a cohesive story than either of the ones on either side of it. So we'd go Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, and then The Force Awakens. I really enjoyed the film, but as some people have said, Randy said it best. I love that. He said, I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose. And in this situation, it wasn't always a good thing. I mentioned before that it felt less like a film and more like I felt like I was watching a 2.5 hour montage because everything was just going so fast and furious. And I feel like we could have benefited from some of these plot elements being introduced in an earlier film, something I'll talk about later. But, to say it's my second favorite of the new trilogy is still no knock on the film because I flew back from New York last week, came back on Monday. And on the way back, my girlfriend and I were listening to the Star Wars radio drama from the BBC. And I had playing on the seat back on my screen, I had The Last Jedi playing, but it was muted because obviously I didn't have any earphones to plug in. And it was interesting watching it on silent, but listening to the Star Wars radio drama because they both felt like they were of the same piece. And so that sort of hammered home to me that The Last Jedi is probably going to remain one of my favorite Star Wars films of all. So again, Rise of Skywalker is going to come in second. And if I was asked to rank it among all of them, I don't think I could at the moment. But again, some issues we'll talk about later, but overall, I really did enjoy it. So that's my long answer to a very short question.
I think that's fascinating, if I may. The Force Awakens, obviously you love, but that features the most of Harrison Ford, your very, very favorite. But you ranked that one
but what
third.
happened to him at the end of it?
Well, that's true. That is very true.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Matt, what about you? Where does this one rank for you?
This one comes in at a solid number 2. The Last Jedi is number 1 for me. And The Force Awakens is number 3, only by sheer dint of The Rise of Skywalker having come out and pushing it down to number 3. I enjoyed this film. I enjoyed it a lot. But to me, The Last Jedi, I think, had explorations of deeper themes and deeper meanings that I think will probably stand the test of time and debate in and outside of the Star Wars community. And to me, that's how a film should be. It should resonate for a while. And I think, if anything, the discourse around The Last Jedi has yet to fade 2 years after it was released.
Right.
Which is a surefire sign that it is a film that made people think either good things or bad things. So The Rise of Skywalker, though, it will always be there. And this, I said to somebody on Twitter, I think this is one of those films that I will watch repeatedly at home. For example, like when I'm working from home, the way I do Rogue One. Because there's just so much to take in, and it's so vastly entertaining. Whereas when I wanted to think and then ponder, it was The Last Jedi that does it for me. So it was a great cinematic spectacle, but it doesn't, to my mind, surpass the excellence that was The Last Jedi.
Very well said. I like that. I'm going to say my comments, but yeah, everyone is raising some fascinating points. Aaron, it is to you. You, I think, in particular, really took a shine to this one from the get-go. Am I right?
I really did. It was right out of the gate. It hit me, and I loved what I saw. I loved what was on screen. I loved what was being fed, and I think a lot of that for me was on the drive from where I live here in Lakeland to Orlando, where we watched it. I sat there and I listened to the soundtrack the whole drive over. Because usually when I watch a movie, the first thing I latch onto is the soundtrack. This way I had that out of the way and I could focus in on the movie and what I was seeing and the story. And doing that actually made me fall more in love with this movie. So ranking it amongst the sequel movies was simple for me. I mean, this is absolutely my favorite. I love all three of them. I think all three of them are strong movies. They all have great stories. They're all a lot of fun. But this one in particular just wrapped up everything from all three trilogies. It had the nostalgia piece. It had the new story piece. It had action. It had laughs. This to me was the whole package in wrapping it up, and definitely would make it my favorite out of the sequel.
Excellent. Dave, what about you? Do you share your co-host sentiments, or do you have a different take?
I share them. Aaron and I are two peas in a pod. I'm really thankful when you sent the email out, Dan, that you said, rank this. Where does it rank in the sequel versus all nine? I would have just lost my mind, I think. But no, I do think about what Jeff said in terms of recency. I love what Matt said about people are absolutely still talking about The Last Jedi 2 years later. But I think for me, it is my favorite out of these three. And you asked why. And I think for me, it's because I really, in my life, I definitely need to see that hope, good defeating evil. And that's why I needed Solo so much. After like Jeff said, when Han died in The Force Awakens, that was a gut punch, and that hurt to leave the theater. And The Last Jedi was heavy. Rogue One, we see all of our heroes, what happens to them at the end. So Solo was so needed for me. And this one as well. There's an old saying that I have as a clinical psychologist: nobody comes to my office happy. If they're happy and feeling better, they don't come see me. So people are miserable and crushed when they come see me. And so when I go to these movies, I definitely need that upbeat, positive, good guys win kind of thing. And I thought about it, Dan, over the past couple of months, just before The Mandalorian came out. And I remember your hesitancy was about, what's going to be the tone of this series on Disney Plus. And I was feeling the same way as you when you were talking. I'm like, oh my God, Dan's hitting it, because I just don't need serious, no talking, etc. I definitely need that. And so it's almost like a product of my own life and my career that I look to these movies to be really uplifting. And so for me, with Leia riding that little piece of metal sliding down in the Lars homestead, and ultimately her standing there and looking at the binary sunset, and you see Luke and Leia over. Of course, I'm crying. Aaron can, vouch for that. I think I lost 10 pounds in water weight during the movie. All of it. I needed that. I love that. And so for me, that really brought it home, and I felt really good. I felt upbeat and I felt hopeful, and it's always fun to see good defeat evil.
Oh, yes. I know I mentioned at the top of the show, but obviously this is a very, very spoiler-filled show, even though we really haven't gotten any spoilers yet at all. So if you haven't seen The Rise of Skywalker yet, definitely pause this and run out and see the movie, because we're about to get into some really, really hot takes. Cory, where does this one rank for you? I'm curious to see if your feelings have changed since we talked about this on Thursday night.
Yeah, so, man, it's tough. I know we all kind of put it up against our favorites, and it's kind of, it's new and fresh in our minds. It's an easy one to rise to the top of our list. But for me, it doesn't top Force Awakens for the new trilogy here for me. I still love Force Awakens, and I think I even kind of had that same feeling coming out of Force Awakens originally, when I thought Star Wars is back. I mean, my kids, Force Awakens was the first movie my kids were able to see in the theaters and kind of as a family, and kind of introduced them to like, hey, this is my Star Wars world. Like, they knew I liked Star Wars, but this is like a brand new generation bringing into it, and kind of revived everything for me. And this just hits such as a high mark for me for Force Awakens. But I don't want to discount Rise of Skywalker because it comes in second for me for the new trilogy, because it is a good film. It does bring a lot of great moments. I think there's some storytelling flaws. I kind of feel like Rise of Skywalker is the sequel to a movie that didn't really exist to some extent. I mean, yes, it came from some weird place from Last Jedi, and a lot of people have had their opinions on that, and I think that's cool. I mean, I think it gets people talking, it gets people excited about stuff, but it felt like an odd kind of shoehorn into this trilogy, and I know that's what we talked about for a while, but for me, I think Force Awakens is still the first, and Rise of Skywalker will definitely live on to, I think, be exciting and fun for all time to come.
That's your second favorite?
Second favorite, yep.
Okay. All right. Wow, interesting. Interesting sequel to a movie that didn't. That's an interesting take. I like that. Tom, what about you? Where are you on this one?
Well, I guess one of the benefits of going second to last is I've changed my mind about 9 times now. You've all given extremely compelling reasons why one should be number 1, 2, and 3. So with that said, they are all very, very closely in rank in my mind, and I could be convinced at any moment to change my ranking. But as it stands right now, I sit here. And Cory, I'm very similar to you. I am so emotionally attached and connected to Force Awakens. It was the return of a Star Wars movie that we've been wanting for so long. And so, like you said, Cory, it revived my energies of Star Wars. It was the first movie that I got to see with my daughter, as both of our eyes watched the same film for the very first time at the very same time. It's the first Star Wars movie and the last Star Wars movie where I cried in the opening. I cried when Han and Chewie entered the Falcon. I bawled when Solo died, and then revived that bawling when Chewie came to rescue Rey and Finn. I mean, I have so much, as I mentioned. So Force Awakens really is my top. Where does The Rise of Skywalker fall? It's a really close second. I felt like, and I said this after our initial review on Thursday night, where I felt The Last Jedi, at the end of that movie, I felt like I'd just gotten done with some big fight, and I was exhausted, and it was an amazing, amazing ride that I didn't know that I wanted to experience, but I'm thrilled that I did. And it was really hard to watch it a second time. As I mentioned, it was almost a full year 2 years since I watched it a second time. But the Rise of Skywalker comes in number 2, right in the middle. So it's Force Awakens, Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi, all very closely. The Rise of Skywalker sits in number 2 because it was a complete thrill ride. I was exhausted for a completely different reason than I was at the end of Last Jedi. I was emotionally attached to it. I had moments in tears, but never a bawling moment like in the Force Awakens. But you guys had me going back and forth with all 3 of those at some point sitting number 1. So
wow,
depends on the day.
Sure. Very cool. Well, I am apparently going to be the only one who feels this way, but I rank this one a very, very distinct last in the new trilogy. The Last Jedi, like Jeff and Matt said to me, is an absolute masterpiece. I think it is incredibly cerebral, and I think visually it's the most beautiful and gorgeously filmed of the new trilogy. And just look at the throne room lightsaber duel, or between when Rey and Kylo team up against all those Praetorian guards and in the red background. I just think that's gorgeous. I think it challenges the way we think about heroes. It challenges the way we think about the hero's journey. The Force Awakens is a wonderful film. I used to say it was a perfect Star Wars film. I've sort of backed up on that a little bit, but I think it's wonderful. This one I really, really like. I can't say I really, really love because of a couple of things that are standing out for me, but I will certainly get to those. And don't get me wrong, I've seen it 3 times. I can't wait to see it again. It's the very first film that I ever took Mason to see in the theaters as far as Star Wars goes. And his reaction when the Star Wars, when the logo for Star Wars came up and faded out, Mason grabbed his chest and he looked at me with his mouth wide open because he was just so taken with emotion. And it jumped up and scared him. And then like at the end when the Ewoks show up, he elbowed me. And I just have so many great memories of that. Every time Rey and Kylo Ren / Ben Solo are on screen together is absolute cinema gold. But there are just some other things that make this a significant step below the other two movies for me. And again, that's not a pejorative. That's just sort of where I'm at with this. So let's go back to the top, Lisa. I asked for everybody to pick 3 topics that you want to discuss, and we're already a half hour into this conversation, and we haven't even talked about the movie yet. So we'll just all give a topic, and then go to the next one, and then we'll just kind of go to the front of that. So in other words, Lisa, you'll give one, Randy, you'll give one, Jeff, you'll give one, blah blah blah. Then we'll get to my first one, then we'll go back to you, Lisa, for your second one, and maybe in the interest of time, we'll just try to keep our comments to about 1 to 3 minutes per topic, just so we can get through this a little more quickly. Lisa, are you ready for your first one?
Sure. My first topic would be because I'm all about Ben Solo, so that was I tend to view these 3 movies kind of through him, not really Rey. I know she's the lead and everything else, but I attached myself to Kylo Ren for some reason. It's odd for me to sort of go for a villain, but I did. But he's not, villain. We could discuss that some other time. But his whole redemption arc in this film, I thought was fantastic, and like I said before, was very satisfying to me. I don't go into these films expecting anything in particular or wanting anything in particular. I mentioned that on Twitter the other day, that I think that bringing your checklist and your expectations into a film, you're just bound to be disappointed. So I didn't really do that. But the only thing that I really wanted to see was to see him saved at the end of the film. I didn't know how that would happen. I didn't have a particular way that I wanted it done. But I appreciated the way that it was done. I thought it was beautiful. I thought that Leia, in one of her last acts in her existence, her life, was to reach out to her son and to touch him in his heart. That to see Han Solo show up, which in my little headcanon, I like to think that Leia sort of facilitated that, using the Force and whatnot, because Han can't be a Force ghost because he doesn't, he's not a Jedi. And that was beautiful. It was very satisfying to me, and that's why the Rise of Skywalker is tops for me of the 3. That was the most meaningful thing for me. Rey's story, absolutely, I love it. I love Rey. I think she's a fantastic character, and was mostly satisfied with her. But Ben was the big thing for me.
Awesome. Yeah, no, there's Layla, and everyone is talking. I'm thinking, well, there's a topic for a show. There's a topic for a show. So there's a lot of gold in this. Randy, give me your first topic that you wanted to bring up real quickly.
Well, as I'm gonna kind of do like a Jeff McGee thing here and kind of give up, like, just kind of shotgun some honorable mentions. So just a few, and then I'll get to my topic. I'll be really quick here. The Chewie's reaction to Leia's death, I thought that was very touching, and I did cry there. I had some tears in my eyes. Billy Lord and Carrie being face to face on screen, I thought that was a very cool, very emotional moment. Where they're having, she just walks up and says "General" and gives like a report, and Carrie responds. I thought that was really special, and pointed that out to my wife. That they didn't see each other in that moment, and it was all put together on screen. How special it must have been for Billy Lord to see that on screen. Must have been really cool. But as I'm watching the movie, there's some things that I wanted to talk to you guys specifically about, and this is my first one. Is I'd love to hear. I'd love to get a list of who you guys think spoke to Rey as she was laying on the stone, hearing all those voices. I heard Ewan McGregor, Kenobi. I heard Mace Windu, Qui-Gon Jinn. I thought I heard Ashley Eckstein's voice as Ahsoka.
You did.
Okay, so that's correct.
You heard Freddie as Kanan.
I heard I heard Mace Windu. I think at one point.
Yeah.
You heard Qui-Gon. You heard Luminara Unduli.
No way.
You heard I believe you heard Ada Gala too.
There's a YouTube video going. There's a YouTube video that goes through all of the.
Yeah, but I wanted to talk about it with you guys because I'm like, oh, that's what I want to ask everyone. That's what I want to talk to. Like, oh, who did you hear? And I'm so glad because I heard, like, I want to hear from you guys, Kanan. You know, I want to hear because nobody I tell my friends that are like, that have freshly printed, Star Wars shirts because they're Star Wars fans. All of a sudden, they're like, oh, that was kind of cool. I'm like, no, you don't get it. See, Kanan was, and if you go the Clone Wars, there's Ahsoka. Anakin had a Padawan, blah blah blah. You can't say that. Only fans like us and those listening would get excited to hear Kanan's voice or Ahsoka's voice. And I kind of knew that you and McGregor, because we've already heard that. These are your first steps. We've heard that in her.
Nice, but Harry says this is your last steps. That's new dialogue.
Your last. Oh wow, that's cool. So that's what I wanted to talk to
Alec
you
Guinness, about. I think, was in there too.
I heard that. I heard the word Rey as
It was the same clip that they used in the Force Awakens. Yeah.
Cool.
And Randy, that was just me revealing my sources for my knowledge when I mentioned the YouTube video.
Okay, very fair. I appreciate that. Thanks, Jeff.
Very good. Well, Jeff, that's your first. That's a great one. Jeff, what's your first one?
Well, mine is going to seem a little light and slight compared to everybody else's, but I figured everybody was going to have some really great ideas because these people are all smarter than me. But the thing that struck me both times when I saw it was that we found out that Finn is indeed Force sensitive, but it was just sort of glossed over.
3 times they acknowledge it, actually.
Someone acknowledged it, or it's just shown in the film?
Well, either way, it's like.
But none of the other characters really acknowledged it, though. It wasn't acknowledged by the film itself. It was just presented, and I just thought that was fascinating. And I wanted to know. I'm wondering if that's what he was going to tell Rey.
Well, it's not unlike what Leia does at the end of The Empire Strikes Back when she knows that they'd have to go back and get Luke.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, yeah, not at all. That's what I mean. But I mean, just the fact that he is force sensitive, because what that does is it makes me feel a little better about him wielding a lightsaber in the first film, because I got really upset because he at that point was the only non-force user besides Han Solo to wield a lightsaber, and it meant that Han was one less special. So now Han's just a little more special. So,
no,
like I said, yeah.
Hey, yeah, no, these are all. I mean, just whatever kind of you want to just kind of get on the show. I think that's really, really cool. Matt, what's your first one?
My first one is the all-encompassing one. 2 words: fan service. This whole film, I thought, did a great job in providing fan service, and that's not a bad thing. I see some people, when they debate Star Wars, say that fan service is a bad thing. I'm a fan. I love to be serviced, and the Rise of Skywalker delivered that. I got those montages, of Luke training Leia. I got to see the Tantive 4 again. And, that is the Tantive 4 in the movie, by the way. I got to see Wedge, firing on board the Falcon when Lando comes barreling in with the fleet of just everybody. Toward the end, you got to see the Ghost. They went full Dark Horse Comics, with everything on Exegol. So, as somebody who's been reading the comics for a long time, and then, somebody, who's been watching all this stuff, and, that's always been my milieu, is finding the little subtle nods to events or things that may have happened in previous films or TV shows or books or comics, to see that in there, to me, that means a lot to me. It shows maybe not a reverence, but definitely a love for the franchise. And I think you can argue that all the way back to the Jedi voices. I mean, there were people who, in the first showing I saw, were going, "Oh my God, that was Anakin!" "Oh my God, that was Hadi. Did you hear Qui-Gon?" And it was really cool. It was really awesome. And I really appreciated that fan service. I didn't really have to think a whole lot, but it appealed to my baser instincts, if you will. I whooped and hollered when they cut to that quick shot of Wedge and the Falcon. I was like, yeah. So to me, I thought that was one of the underlying aspects of this film that made it so enjoyable.
The Wedge thing is so quick, but it's so perfect. And just seeing Dennis Lawson in the cockpit was great.
It is, and you take that into context if you'd read Resistance Reborn, which is all about Snap recruiting Wedge and his mom, to join the Resistance, and it all paid off. I thought and in the film, I thought it didn't shy away from making some bold choices. Big spoiler, I was crushed to see Snap die. Because I've been a big fan of Snap since The Force Awakens, and of course since reading the entire Poe Dameron comic book series. But yeah, to me, fan service was my big takeaway from this film.
Love it. Yeah, love it. There's been a lot of great stuff that has come out of that. Aaron, what is your first topic you want to bring up?
Well, the first topic I want to bring up, I actually brought up a little bit when I was talking about how I ranked the movie, but the big thing for me was the John Williams soundtrack, his final Star Wars soundtrack. And to me, it was huge. For me, it was very moving. I mean, the fact that I listened to it before I got to the movie and was able to soak in just the music without any perspective of what's going on in the movie, was very enjoyable. And then when I actually watched it, and I could pick out this piece here, that piece there from the soundtrack I had just listened to, made it even more real. Personally, I think it's probably one of the best ones he's ever done. It ranks right up there in his top soundtracks. His one piece on there, I believe it's called Destiny of the Jedi, was just, without even seeing the movie, when I was just driving to Orlando, was literally just like, I almost had to pull over because it was just such an emotional piece. And it added so much to the depth of what was going on in the movie. David Collins always said it best. John Williams was basically the breath of this movie. The soundtracks, his music was just the breath of the movie. And this wasn't just a breath. This was just full on. He was just blowing into this movie as hard as he could. And to me, it was probably the best part of the movie.
The soundtrack, I think this is the first soundtrack where they did a new take on the opening score, because both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi used the same intro, the same exact intro. So it was a little bit different. And I agree, this is great. I think it's a wonderful soundtrack. One of the best John Williams has done in 10 years.
And if I could just jump in real quick, Aaron, did you see John Williams' cameo?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure you saw that.
Yes.
Pretty fun.
That was a lot of fun.
Made it even more special at that point because there's the master. He's just sitting right there. It's just, it was great.
Dave, what's your first topic you want to bring up?
Well, like Tom said a minute ago, as soon as everyone starts giving their ideas, I like all of them. But I actually my first one was Leia's storyline. I was really curious to see what they would do in this with her dying in December of 2016. I love what they did. JJ said it was going to be something that they felt really did justice. And I love getting to see her leading the Resistance, training Rey. When Rey smiles and calls her master, I just love that. Getting to see that clip of her training with Luke was really cool. Her having Han's medal in her hands and ultimately having Maz give that to Chewie. And then her effect on the big battle there on Kef Bir, right? The moon of one of the moons of Endor. And I thought it was interesting and kind of like Randy was asking, what did you guys hear in terms of Jedi's voices? Do I remember it correctly? I've seen it twice, but it's probably watching it through tears. She doesn't go into the Force. I'm thinking about Return of the Jedi when Yoda dies in front of Luke and his little blanket goes down and Yoda goes into the Force, Leia's body, it looks like she doesn't go into the Force until Ben goes into the Force. Mm-hmm. And I love that touch. Do I remember that correctly? Yes?
You did, yeah. She waited for her son.
It's very symbolic.
Loved that. Love that. So I was so glad to see that it go that way. And so that was the first thing that I wanted to cover, Leia's storyline.
Well, I love that too. And think about the fact that they have such a strong bond, but not once in any of the 3 movies did they share any screen time together. Not one single time, not for 1 second. But they still make that point work. There's still pathos there, and I think that's pretty impressive. Cory, what is the first topic that you want to bring up?
Yeah, I gotta go similarly with what Lisa said. That Kylo Ren's story or Ben Solo's story is so fascinating through these 3 films. There's a scene where he's kind of perched up on the edge of the Death Star. He just finished battling Rey, and basically he lost. And there's a quiet moment. There's almost a beat where these waves behind him are crashing and stuff, and you can see the confliction in him. And he's basically lost. Every time he comes up against something, he loses every time. Up against Luke, up against Rey the first time around, against his subordinates. They just don't. I mean, like, he just can't get into the dark side. It seems, he can't that foothold. And they hear Harrison Ford's voice. He says, "Hey, kid," right there. I just about lost it, and I'm not a crier. I mean, I just like that moment. I did not expect to happen, and for me, this is like one of my top Star Wars moments in all the films. It's just a beauty stroke, and just because we know who Han Solo is and how much he rejected kind of all this stuff, and we have to hear it from somebody who had also kind of go through that journey, and just him, that little speech he does there. Ending with the "I know," which is really a callback to what he does in Empire, and just a beautiful scene. And I'm so glad that Harrison Ford is back in this film, and I didn't even see it coming, and it was just an awesome moment. I know that for fans, over the years, I'm curious what you guys think too. Is like, what is that like for you? Is just seeing it back in '77 and just like seeing these big icons on the screen for the last time. This is the last time we'll see Han Solo on the screen in this capacity, and just that there's a lot going on in that scene if you kind of think about it. But what you guys kind of thoughts just seeing these icons on the screen for the very last time?
Well, it's heaven. I mean, it's absolute heaven. When that happened, when I saw it at the premiere, and he said, "Hey, kid," I looked at Deanna and I said, "Do you know what this means?" And she says, "No, what are you talking about?" And I literally held my breath and stared at the screen, and up strolled Harrison. And, I was beyond myself, just absolutely thrilled. Jeff, what do you think?
Oh, there was applause in the theater led by me when that happened. And Pam, my girlfriend, was sitting next to me, and when you heard "Hey, kid," it registered with her before it registered with me, and then it registered with me when she gripped my arm so tight that her nails dug into my ow, what? Oh. And then when he said "I know," she just burst into tears. And I'm like Cory, I'm not much of a crier. Not that I'm not emotional. It doesn't manifest itself that way. I'm still processing that, and it was such a nice surprise. It was not something I expected to see because, again, he can't come back as a Force ghost. And even the second time through, it just sort of it took my breath. And I thought when Matt mentioned fan service before, that was sort of the ultimate fan service for me. The ultimate wish fulfillment for Jeff was seeing Han Solo have a part in redeeming his son like he was trying to do in the beginning.
Very much so. It rights the ship in a lot of different ways. Tom, what's the first one you have?
Well, actually, I'm going to give my take on Cory's point, and that is that I was the fool in the theater. The last time my daughter next to me said she was all in with all of you, knowing that was going to be Han Solo. Because I leaned over to her, and you're all going to laugh at me, and I can't believe I'm throwing myself under the bus like this. But the last time Kylo Ren had any interaction with somebody who was teaching him a lesson was Luke Skywalker. So I leaned down to my daughter and I said, hey, it's going to be Luke. And she looks at me like, Dad. And then I look up, I'm like, oh, Han Solo.
I just unmuted my mic to laugh because I love that. That would have been me. That would have been me. I love that so much.
I thought that I had an up on telling my daughter what was going to happen, and she was like, Dad, it's going to be Han Solo, dude. Anyway, so this I've been dying to talk about my first item here, and Dan, I kind of gave you a preview of this. The night after, on Thursday night, I could not sleep. And I don't mean like I couldn't fall asleep from the adrenaline. I mean I couldn't stay asleep. I kept having dreams and borderline nightmares, and it made me think about this movie a little bit more when it came to Friday morning. And the realization that I had, now I'm falling apart, my headset just fell off and I dropped my notes. The realization that I had was that there was like horror movie in this film. The whole sequences, from the opening sequence where Kylo Ren goes to Palpatine, and even in the crawl where it says, what does it say specifically? Death speaks, or what's the language?
The dead speak.
The dead speak too. So the horror aspect of it that was really impacting on me, there are several of them, and it was everything from the dark and flashing lights that kept giving you a different perspective of Palpatine's face or even Rey's face, to the mad scientist lab that Kylo Ren walks through and sees pieces of Snoke in there and other like Bacta, whatever tubes of fluid and whatnot, to the minions that are out in this stadium of crowd that it's very vague as to, are they actually there? Are they not there? What are they? Who are they? But they've got this creepy chant that keeps going and throbbing in your head, all the way down to the Frankenstein-like machine that Palpatine is being held together by. And it convinced me, and I know this could be open for debate, but it convinced me that was actually Palpatine. I do not believe personally that this is a clone of him. I believe this is him being kept alive by this machine that has the tubes pumping fluid into him. And it's like he's been recreated and he's being kept alive by this giant arm mechanical machine, almost like he's recreated himself, like he recreated Darth Vader in a way. But this horror theme really stuck with me in an unconscious kind of way, I believe, and just made my brain process this all night long.
Interesting.
Has it even been suggested that might be a clone?
Well, they say in the movie they're cloning at the very beginning.
Right, but it didn't dawn on me that he could have been a clone like Tom. Like how?
No,
would he, how would
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know for sure. But Matt, do you have any idea?
Oddly enough, the visual guide, which I picked up Friday, it almost completely skips over most of the Palpatine stuff completely.
That doesn't surprise me. Actually.
I was under the impression that perhaps Snoke was clearly a clone. It was grown and created by these acolytes of the Beyond. Mm-hmm. As for Palpatine, I'm thinking that perhaps maybe if it's not a clone, it's he was perhaps constructed from genetic samples and materials, and grown in a vat, and his Sith Force imbued himself into that body. But as Tom said, he was clearly being kept alive by machines. He was literally on life support, which right. Details the full reason why he wanted Rey there. But I mean, it had a total Dark Empire vibe from Dark Horse Comics, throughout that whole thing on Exegol.
Oh yeah.
And I got to admit, the horror aspect I thought was kind of cool because we finally got to see, the workings of Sith lore and Sith temples and Sith iconography. That had only been mentioned in the previous films. And I really dug it a lot. So, but man, they are a devoted and dutiful bunch.
They are a bunch of rascals, that's for sure.
My question was, how did you get Mason through that?
I had coached him before, and I already told him pretty much every time they show Palpatine's face, we're going to have you close your eyes. Once he made him to a full-figured face. Well, as close to Revenge of the Sith, I guess. He looked at that. The chanting didn't bother him for whatever reason. I don't know why. But I'm glad. He's a pretty tough. He's a sweet boy. But he's also pretty tough too. So he doesn't really. He's got 2 older brothers that help kind of balance out everything.
Gotcha.
But then like with the grotesque hands and the face melting a la Raiders, he definitely didn't watch that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So my first one, I can sum it up for you in one word, and that word is yellow. One of the great things about
that was my third point. So let's go ahead and Wait. No. That's good because it was my third because I didn't figure we were going to get to it. So go.
Okay.
Carry on.
So during the premiere, one of the cool things about it is that it's almost like you're at a sporting event. In fact, right before it started, I looked at my wife and I said, "This feels just like Game 7 of the World Series." I was just so pumped up, so fired up. People clapped for the whole thing. They cheered. But for some reason, I did something I've never done in my life. I was yelling at the screen throughout the movie. But at the end, she turns on the lightsaber and I screamed, "Yellow!" And Deanna looks at me like, "Have you lost your mind?" I was just so excited about that because I've often wondered what will Rey's lightsaber look like when she has her own kyber crystal. And when I saw the yellow, at first I thought about Luke's lightsaber from the original Kenner line, the fact that his is yellow. And I thought that was a nice little callback. And ironically, the week before that, I was in Galaxy's Edge in Florida, and I bought a yellow kyber crystal just because I thought it was fun and because of the Kenner thing and the Jedi Temple guards. Lo and behold, Rey has one. It's the first yellow one on screen that's canon. Of course, in Clone Wars and Rebels, we see yellow as well, just for the guards. So that was great. But then I thought about it some more, and I came to realize that hers has to be yellow because it's the closest to the sun. It's the closest to hope, since she is the new hope. And I thought it was beautiful, metaphorical, and the way she clicks the lightsaber to turn it on. I'm such a lightsaber hilt aficionado anyway, and I just ate that up like it was candy. I was absolutely delighted by that.
Also, Dan, the reason it excited me, you mentioned Luke's lightsaber, but also when the role-playing lightsabers came out in the early 80s, there were just the tubes. One of Luke's was yellow. It was a yellow and a red one. So that was the thing that felt the most fan service-y to me. I was like, oh, that's like when I was a kid.
Plus the balloon one in 78 that they came with that Kenner sold.
Right.
The balloon. Yep. I know. So good. Is that what you were going to say for yours?
Yeah, that was it. That was it. Yeah.
Boom. All right. Wow. That's awesome. All right. We'll tell you what. We have been talking for an hour. Basically, we're halfway through the show. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will get the next 2 topics what I want to talk about. And then we're going to talk about what didn't work for us in the Rise of Skywalker. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Rise of the Resistance is now open at Walt Disney World and will be open very, very soon at Disneyland. So you need to be sure and book some experiences to the East and West Coast so you can experience Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge, and Rise of the Resistance. And I can think of no better way to do that than through MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Their signature service and expert advice will help clients maximize their vacation time and dollar. Their no-cost, no-obligation quote when you use the service is really wonderful, and they also proactively adjust the booking if the rate goes down. They will help your family enjoy everything Galaxy's Edge and the Disney theme parks and the cruise lines have to offer, help plan every detail, and will share invaluable tips. Be sure to go to our affiliate link, which can be found in the show notes on the front of our webpage or on our social media, and sign up for a free, no-obligation quote. You'll have the best vacation possible and help out Coffee with Kenobi in the process. So be sure to tell them that Dan Z and Coffee with Kenobi sent you. So much of what happens at Coffee with Kenobi is possible because of our wonderful Coffee with Kenobi Patreon contributors. I'd like to thank Jason Hall, Dennis Keithley, Lane Hickerson, Adam Bankhurst, David Nicely, Jeff Ellis, Colby Mead, Ross Halliban, Frank Mulder, Alexander Moylan, Aaron Harris, Chris Kavarka, Angela Sauce, Tyler Pompa, Hannah, Yancey Evans, Alex Procasio, Tim Van Swall, Ian Thompson, Simbot Defterdarian, Christine Turk, Sean Reed, Kurt McKellen, Dan Ream, Brian Harding, Blake Weaver, Jim Capron, Caroline Maselli, Chris Metz, LJ Souter, Thea Selby, Daz Davies, Christian Dale, Brian McKinney, Jared Cantor, BJ Smith, Eric Struthers, Nick Deco, and Mark Suter. Thanks to all of you, Coffee with Kenobi is able to grow and flourish in ways we never would have thought possible, and you get something out of it as well. For $5 or more a month, you get access to CWK Pour-Over, which is our exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else, hosted by myself, Tom Gross, and Cory Clubb, where we talk about Star Wars. We go behind the scenes of what goes on into covering events and producing Coffee with Kenobi and popular culture. We review movies, all kinds of fun stuff, and we have a great time bringing it to you. And for $10 or more a month, you get access to CWK Lens, which gives you a ton of video and photos behind the scenes of what's going on. When I was on Rise of the Resistance, I posted a lot of pictures and images that only you got to see. I didn't put on Instagram or Twitter or anywhere else, only for CWK Patreon contributors. If you have any questions or want to find out more about how to support Coffee with Kenobi, be sure to go to www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi and sign up today. Thank you so much. We are back, Lisa. We are back to you. We're probably going to have to go even quicker on all of our points, which is going to be hard because there's so much to discuss. But what is your second topic you want to talk about for The Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, that's fine. I can be quick because my second one is one that has already been addressed, and that was Leia. We're all wondering after Carrie passed away, but they still wanted to make her a part of The Rise of Skywalker because you couldn't not have Leia in the film. And, I think a lot of people were concerned, how is this going to be done? What's it going to look like? Is it going to be awkward? Because they had so little, they had like 9 minutes of footage, I think, to work with. And I think that they did a beautiful job. I thought that she was just stunningly beautiful in the film. I thought that every scene that she had a lot of weight to it. And it really felt that Carrie was there. It was like somehow they brought her back. Mm. And every time that she was on, I was a little surprised at how emotional I got over it. And I just thought it was handled in a very respectful and I think classy manner. And like somebody else had mentioned, I forget who it was, about how Billie Lourd must have felt, working with her mother one last time on screen. And it was beautifully done. I was very pleased with that.
Randy, what's your next one?
My next one, I did want to talk about. I guess my second one was kind of like, I guess officially it's what didn't work for me. So I don't know if I should save that for later or just go ahead.
Yeah, save that one because I think that's a whole other kind of a context.
Okay. Well, then I'll just go to my third one, which was the Palpatine to Skywalker thing, and I had already texted the thought to you. But just in conversation with a friend who is a couple that had just seen the movie, and they know, like, I'm a podcaster. They wanted to know what my take was. Hey, the criticism is it was very presumptuous for Rey to assume the Skywalker name. And so this is my like podcaster quote or whatever, and I'd love for you to put this on the wall, Tom, in your event.
Oh, cool.
It's coming up in January. But this is the quote, and this is my thought that it just kind of spilled out in my conversation with them. If a Palpatine can become a Skywalker, then any kid with a plastic lightsaber and an imagination can too. And I felt that despite bloodlines and despite her past, she became a Skywalker, or embodied the spirit of what it means to be a Skywalker. Again, idealism leads to that hope, and then that hope is satisfied with a really cool outcome. So that's my third or my second or whatever, wherever we're at right now.
Sure.
Is the Palpatine to Skywalker thing I thought was very sweet and it was appropriate.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Tom, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say, Randy, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it for the event, but also what a great sentiment.
Absolutely.
I'll send that along an email for you, Tom. Thank you for liking it, guys.
Oh gosh, of course. Jeff, what's your next one?
Well, once again, following Randy, mine is going to seem very slight, but it goes along with some of the thematic things we've been talking about. One of the moments that struck me the most was when Rey healed. I'm just going to call him Ben because he's Ben from this point on. He ceased to be Kylo Ren. When she healed Ben's lightsaber wound, the scar on his face also disappeared, which to me was and I didn't even notice it the first time around. It was the second time when I saw it. It was on the big IMAX screen. It was very, very emblematic and very representative of the fact that he was Kylo Ren was dying, and Ben was coming back up to the surface. And I just loved that slight little touch that you might not. Again, I didn't even notice it the first time, but it's subconscious, because when I went back and looked, and sure enough, when he's got that big close up near the end when he gets the lightsaber from Rey, the scar is gone, and that was just something I just really liked. That I loved the idea of this scar disappearing, and it really was sort of the washing away of his previous sins.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
I'll jump in real quick. Jeff, I did not know that scar had disappeared.
Spoilers. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. I think that's really cool, and I hadn't put that together, but because it was and Last Jedi was such a big feature on his mug there. But yeah, that's great. I'll have to go see it again and check that out.
Oh, it heals his soul. I mean, that's another metaphor. There's a lot of beautiful metaphors in this one. Matt, what's the next one that you have?
The next one I had involved Lando Calrissian. I was very satisfied with the way he was brought into the story. That of a scoundrel with name recognition among smugglers, who is felt he has earned his respite, yet is unafraid to step up when needed. Particularly when they were on Posada, and Rey and Finn and Poe and 3PO and Chewie were there, searching, trying to complete the work that Luke Skywalker had been doing. And I felt that his role in the story was rather organic, all the way to the end point where he is talking to Janna, they're sharing where they're from, and the elixir goes, well, maybe we should find out, and that was a nod, I think, to the fact that in the visual dictionary to the Rise of Skywalker, it states very simply that the reason Lando sort of cut himself off from the wider galaxy was that his child was kidnapped by the First Order. When at a very young age. And so it's kind of implied now, or perhaps I am inferring that maybe Janna is his daughter. We don't know, but it sets it up for what I think could be sort of splinter stories arising out of the sequel trilogy.
We're going to get a comic book about that story.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, we totally will. But it's funny because in the build up to this film, Lucasfilm kept on the final story, the end to the Skywalker saga. But they were good enough to leave lots of, for lack of a better term, dangling threads that could be explored in other media. Whether it's a book or a comic, whether it might be something on Disney Plus, and that to me, that meant a lot to me as a fan of Star Wars, whether it's a longtime fan or a just arrived fan, that there is the potential for more Skywalker saga stories, even if it doesn't involve the actual Skywalker family.
Right.
So that, and I also really appreciated the links they went through to right some wrongs. Most notably, as was brought up earlier, when Chewie was given Han Solo's medal, for his efforts at the battle, and destroy the Death Star at the Battle of Yavin. But finally, Chewie himself, Unisunto was so expressive that it was like watching Peter Mayhew on the big screen again. He really, to my mind, stepped up and matched, scene for scene, hair for hair, everything that Peter Mayhew brought to the role of Chewbacca. And in no way am I denigrating Peter Mayhew for that. In no way am I denigrating Yunosunto for that. But it was a very seamless transition, and it really emphasized the affection that I have always had for Chewbacca. And that scene, when Leia died, when he dropped to his knees and was howling, I was weeping openly in the theater. So
that was the biggest moment of pathos in the whole movie for me. That moment, it really was. That wretched.
Yeah, and it just, I think it, in Star Wars, everybody will get you in trouble, but only 3 characters will get you out of trouble: R2-D2, BB-8, and Chewbacca. So the fact that they emphasized Chewie's role it meant a lot to me as a longtime fan. It meant a lot to me as somebody who enjoys a good story. So
I love it. Aaron, what's the next one you have?
Well, the next one I have actually ties into what Jeff was talking about a moment ago when he was talking about Rey's healing of Ben's wounds at that point. Because the first time we see her use that healing power was on that serpent underneath in the desert underneath when they were in the tunnel. And when we first saw that, it struck me because it's an immediate tie-in to what we saw the day before in the release of the latest episode of The Mandalorian, where we see the child, aka Baby Yoda, healing Carl Weathers' character. And I started rolling that through my head. I'm like, man, they introduced the power with the child, and Rey has it now. I'm like, that's can't be a coincidence. Then I thought back to Last Jedi when we have Luke force projecting himself into that battle on the Battle of Crate to delay the First Order from while the Resistance escaped. And I'm like, I remember talking to several people and seeing the outcry online around, where does this protection power come from? This can't be right. That's new. We don't like this new stuff. And it almost made me wonder if they introduced it through the most popular character probably in Star Wars right now, the child, and just made it acceptable when Rey did it. And I really, I didn't think twice about it because I'd already seen the child do it in The Mandalorian. So that extra power that she had to heal was, to me, quite unique. It was unique, but it wasn't unique because we'd seen somebody else do it. But it was a very uniquely introduced and prefaced as, yeah, this exists already. It was like no big deal at that point.
Dave, what's your next one?
Yeah, I back when the title of The Rise of Skywalker was released, I think all of us probably immediately started to think, what does that mean? Especially with the announcement that the Skywalker saga, that at least that component was going to end. And so I think about the multiple meanings. I wrote down several. One is, is the Rise of Skywalker referring to Luke? And I'm kind of asking you guys this too, just to get your thoughts, all of you. Is it Luke telling Rey he was wrong about being fearful, that he's back, and he helps guide her like Yoda did in The Last Jedi, in that beautiful scene on Ashto, or Octo, I guess, however we pronounce it. Is it Kylo?
It's Ashto.
It's Ashto. Yep. Is it Kylo being redeemed so that the last Skywalker is back like Anakin was back? So is that the rise of Ben Skywalker? Is it Leia helping to save Ben and ultimately his redemption, like the rise of her? Rey, Matt mentioned this a minute ago, taking on the name Skywalker at the end of the movie. And like he said, we have an end of the saga, but clearly could see many more quote unquote Skywalker adventures occurring later. And I'd mentioned this to Aaron back before, Rise of Skywalker came out. I kind of thought is that going to be the new name? That they're going to be Jedi. It's instead of using Jedi, it's Skywalker. and almost like when Rey buries those two lightsabers on Tatooine, I almost feel like the persons that will unearth those will be Skywalker, right, instead of Jedi. That'll be kind of their name designation. So I don't know. What do you guys, is the Rise of Skywalker, do you think all of those or just one of those people, or what do you think?
I think if he's they're a dyad in the Force, I believe that's the term they use. It's both of them. It's the rise of Ben Solo, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and then it's also the rise of the name and a new path for the Skywalker name from a place of, well, you're not hiding, you're not banishing yourself from somewhere, you're not a disgraced Jedi who turns to the dark side. This is the Skywalker legacy lives on and emphasizes, I think, the most important theme that we see in The Mandalorian and Rebels and Clone Wars and the films, that family isn't just about blood. It's about the relationships we form with people that we love, whether we're related to them or not. And I think that's why it's the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I would say I'd go with my thought was for Skywalker was kind of like passing on the Sith and Jedi a title of a person with a Force user being a Skywalker, and how it permeates throughout the Star Wars universe and being kind of the new term. But I do like your other variations of the theme too. It's interesting to see where that will kind of go and where the future will take us.
Well, Cory, what's your next topic?
Sure, yeah, I love what you guys have been saying so far, but I'm going to bring up one that maybe just is a little bit different than maybe what your thoughts were. I'm going to bring up Zora Bliss. Kerry Russell in Star Wars, when she was announced, I mean, she's a beautiful actress, and to put her behind a giant golden mask, I was like, well, come on now, it's just interesting to see that her character play out in this, and it brings such an origin to Poe himself. Like, we get a little bit of origin with him and his past and how he has kind of done some things in other places and created some trouble. But I really liked her character. I liked what she was kind of doing. She was part of this gang. We got little insights here and there, but just one of those side characters I think that really worked for me. I liked the way that her design was. But she was willing to reach out and help. I think it was kind of cool to see that manifest. I know she was just kind of there to be a supporting character, but it was cool. I liked the way it was just played into that role and the character all along. It's just interesting to see new characters come up like that. I think that's what Star Wars is all about. I think sometimes it's, yes, we can get kind of with these main characters, Skywalkers and Sith Lords and stuff, but then the side characters really promote the strength of the main characters and seeing, where they struggled in the past, or what they've overcome, and what they seem to be where they are at this point. But it's cool to see that, I think, and how that plays out. And I'm curious to see where her character will go after this too.
Tom, what's your next one?
Well, I feel like I'm sitting in a sports fantasy draft where the person right before me takes my so Zora Bliss was my next draft pick.
No.
So I'll go to my next one after that. And Dan, you're going to have to help me out with the literary device that I'm looking for here. But when I found it to be somewhat beautiful that Rey returns to her scavenger roots to climb through the old Death Star back to the throne room in search of the I called it it was like a holocron, but a Sith holocron. Yeah. To find that, but only to discover by returning to her roots, she would eventually find out who she was. And I found that whole scene where it's like a secondary cave experience where she goes in and sees the Sith version of herself. And I just found that to be a really moving part of the movie for me. Where again, just I guess to repeat it, and what's the literary device being used there? Is it symbolic?
I suppose it's symbolic. It's very much like sort of antithesis of her, like kind of a funhouse mirror version of herself. You could also call it sort of her dark foil. I mean, Matt,
Bizarro Ray.
Yeah, Matt, can you think of another term maybe?
I can, but it may not be suitable.
Well, so anyway, I'll make that my number 2 then, is her returning to her roots as a scavenger to discover herself.
That's cool. David, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to piggyback on what you were saying, Dan. And to answer Tom's, it really felt like, Luke going into the Dagobah cave. Isn't that the going into the belly of the whale, or even the Night Sea journey, right?
Oh yeah.
In mythology, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And even the fact that her teeth become like predatorial in nature, I think are pretty neat too. My next one is I was going to talk about Carrie Fisher, but I think that Lisa already pointed that out really well, and the rest of you did too. I thought she was used perfectly, but the one I really want to talk about is Ben Solo and his redemption. And I've been saying for 4 years that I didn't think it was possible for him to be redeemed. I didn't think he should be redeemed. I was so upset with him about The Force Awakens, and in The Last Jedi, he was nothing but selfish and manipulative. And then a funny thing happened that I didn't expect. He became my favorite character in the movie. And I've never been a Kylo Ren guy. I mean, I've always thought he was cool. I love his lightsaber. I love how it growls, and I just think he's awesome. And then I showed The Last Jedi last week to my students, and they kept referring to him as Ben Swallow because there's the scene where he has his shirt off. And they were just enamored with it. I know, it's pretty funny. They were enamored with him, and then that became kind of a hot topic at the premiere between a lot of us. Adam Driver, and how he's very striking. And that never really, did anything for me. But then I started to get it. And then when he does change, even his music changes, which is another absolute tribute to the genius and the brilliance of John Williams. They play Kylo's theme, but they play it lighter. They played just a little bit with a hint of tragic behind it, but it's also uplifting. And I thought, wow, they're taking this very familiar theme of darkness and making it light, just like him, all the way to the point where he even acts like Han, where he shoots backwards, where he kind of does that little hand thing before he's about to do battle with all the Knights of Ren. Just fabulous. I couldn't believe how much I loved it. Every time he's on screen, I found myself just thrilled by it. And again, the reason I'm bringing that up is because I just did not expect that to be on my radar. So I'm going to do an audible. I know we've got 3 topics we want to discuss. We're on our 3rd one. So I'm going to give you the option just because I really do want to keep this to 2 hours. When it's your turn, feel free to jump into the topic you want to discuss or jump into what did not work for you. Because I think there's plenty there that we can talk about either way as well. So, Lisa, go ahead. What do you think?
Okay, well.
And feel free, if it's ones that don't work, feel free to throw a couple in there, 2 or 3 in there at once, because this will probably be the last time we go around the horn.
Okay. I've got 2 things. I don't know if they really qualify as things that I would say that didn't work for me. But there are things that,
or just what you want to talk about. Yeah.
Maybe things that I was a little disappointed in or confused by, I suppose. But the first one, piggybacking on what you just said about Ben, we got so little time with him. And like you said, he was such a spectacular character as Ben Solo that it kills me that we only got like 5 minutes with him. And he had no dialogue other than ouch.
I think that's a massive challenge for me, which I'll talk about later.
Yeah. We had so little time with him. And then, he's wonderful. Like you said, he became very much like Han Solo. He had when he got the lightsaber from Rey, he did that little shrug, to the Knights of Ren and everything else. It's just, I wish that somehow, and I mean, the whole movie would have had to be structured differently. I wish that had happened earlier in the film so we could have spent more time with this character before he ultimately sacrificed himself to bring Rey back from the dead. I just, because now there can't be any comic books or anything like that exploring Ben Solo because he's dead. There's, it's done. And I just feel a little gypped that, Adam went from being the dark Kylo Ren to being Ben Solo and just light and free. And then he was taken from us so quickly. And that I'm still kind of stewing about that.
Well, it's very Shakespearean, quite beautiful.
Oh, yeah. And the second thing is the whole Palpatine deal. I can accept that at some point Palpatine had a family. Okay, it's possible. He was a senator. Most politicians are married, have families. He'd want to keep up appearances that he's
true.
This great guy and whatnot. So I buy that. I wish that there had been some sort of foundation laid for it though, because it just sort of came out of left field, and I'm still a little. The whole that he's Rey's grandfather thing is just a little odd. Like it just plopped right there. So that's my, that's still a little, I mean, I can accept it. I can accept just about anything. I mean, this is fiction, so it's not that this isn't life or death or anything else.
Right.
I kind of wish that maybe the seeds had been planted in The Force Awakens, or, I mean, you can't go back to the prequels, but if there had been a mention of the prequels of, him talking about his wife or something like that. But, the way that it just sort of came out of nowhere, and just this feels a little strange to me. I'm not entirely on board with it, but, I can live with it, but it's a little strange the way it appeared.
No,
if that makes any sense. I don't even know if I'm explaining it.
No, it makes perfect sense. I'm going to talk about that when I get to my point, actually. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Randy, what? Yeah, those are good. Those are good. See, like I said, we've got like topics upon topics upon topics to talk about for the next 6 months easily. Randy, what are your last points? You want to talk about things that you liked that you still want to bring up, or things that didn't work for you?
I did feel that the Palpatine thing worked, just because when we think about the trilogy and how Anakin and Padme could kind of keep their relationship secret because private lives were kind of separate from political and Jedi service, and so there was kind of a separation there. So I kind of like retreat to that kind of thought in my head. But the thing that didn't work for me, and is kind of so far it's equivalent to the Luke and the green milk kind of scene for me. I hope I don't get in trouble here. But the kiss, I thought the kiss at the end was like, I thought that Rey was emotionally attached to Finn, and that would have been, and we were led. I didn't know what I was supposed to want. Like, I didn't know, like, with with Finn saying, "Hey, there's something I haven't told you before we go into, drop into this pit of, of whatever." And then there was, this kind of conversation, from, well, obviously the kiss from the past, with Rose and Finn, and then this new character coming in, and I didn't know what I was relationship wise. I'm okay with romance. I think the kiss between, in the Millennium Falcon, during the Empire Strikes Back, that C-3PO interrupted, I thought that was really cool, especially with the soundtrack behind it. I thought it was amazing. But I just didn't know what I was supposed to want. And then when that kiss happened, it was just like, I know that I picked up a little hint in The Last Jedi, when they're going up the elevator to see Snoke, and Rey steps close to him and says, "I can help you. Like, we can overtake him. I can help you." And I saw a little bit there, but even we all talked about it. Like, no, that wasn't romantic. It just blah, blah. But I just didn't know what I was supposed to want in the relationships, and how people were being kind of paired up here, and how the relationships were hinted. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's a kiss. And it was like, man, I mean, it's not that I didn't see it coming. It's just that I didn't think that would be the right expression for the right two people.
Sure.
But I'm, so that was the thing that I think didn't really work. When it was about to happen, I kind of went to my wife like, oh no. And then
can I weigh in on that with you real quick?
Sure.
I had a similar reaction, and I actually said aloud, "Oh, come on!" I yelled that out. In addition to yellow, I yelled out, "Oh, come on!" And
so did the guy behind me.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, Deanna looked at me and she goes, "Why does that bother you?" I said, "Well, I'll explain it after the movie." So I said, I just don't. I've never thought of that. The Reylo people are gonna love it and go wild, and that's fine. But I just don't see how that works. And she said, "This is how I'm taking it." And she's, by all accounts, not a huge Star Wars fan by any stretch of the imagination, but she's a counselor and she's a student of emotion. And she said, "This is not a kiss where she has pictures of Ben Solo in her locker. This is a kiss where she has a reaction to human emotion, because Ben, for a very long time has not had any kind of physical emotion or contact with people. And now he's in a situation where they share this bond or this horrifically PTSD inducing experience. And they come out of it as survivors, and they're just making a connection. They're relating to one another, and in the most intimate way possible. But it isn't intimacy, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
And then he smiles because they're actually experiencing emotion and compassion together. And then he dies. And when you think of it that way, I actually think it's kind of beautiful.
It's so funny. Your wife Deanna and my wife Dina. Dina said the same thing. She's like, "Yeah, I get it." I'm like,
"See, yeah, exactly."
Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'll bring my junior high self back over here. Then.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. Lisa, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say I didn't have any problems with it, and I'm not a Reylo. I don't ship characters. That's just not my thing. I'm just too old and crabby, I guess. But I didn't really view it as being necessarily a romantic type kiss. But because they're a dyad and the Force, and they're like two halves of one whole, is sort of the way. So they're drawn to each other through all three films. And this just seemed like a logical step, after he brought her back to life and the other small. But so it wasn't necessarily a romantic kind of thing, but it made sense to me, and it didn't bother me in any way. I just thought, well, in a way, they're kind of soulmates, really, and
but not romantic. I don't.
Yeah, not necessarily in a romantic sort of
they're
way.
Connected.
They're two parts of one whole is how I was looking at it.
Right. Oh, I like that. I like that.
I can get there.
So, Randy, you have one more, you said?
No, that was the thing. That was the one.
Well, in
all
that
right,
case,
excellent. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
In that case, let me chime in on this whole discussion about the kiss. I was just about to say something. I think I disagree with you a little bit, Dan. I think there is some intimacy there, but it's not necessarily physical intimacy, because we've known since at least The Last Jedi that Rey and Kylo, they're the only people who know what the other is going through. And I was really looking forward to them exploring that dynamic in this film, because it's the first time we've had Han and Leia who were polar opposites, but it's the first time we've had people who were antagonists of one another to be the only person who knows what the other person is going through. And it turns out, them being, the dyad of the Force, they were literally two sides of the same coin. So the kiss to me was inevitable. So that's kind of where I took that. But since we already talked about the yellow lightsaber, the big problem I had with the film, the issue I had, I believe Cory said it felt like I was watching a sequel to a movie that never happened. And I think that is a big part of my problem. It felt like there was too much crammed into this one. I would have loved to have seen Palpatine being alive have been the cliffhanger to The Last Jedi. And I'm wondering why it wasn't. And possibly even have revealed that Rey was his granddaughter then. But then at that point, you've got people who are decrying it because it's aping The Empire Strikes Back too closely. But I really feel like had we had the realization that Palpatine was still alive at the end of The Last Jedi, it would have saved us a good 20 minutes of film time here that we could have used on other things, on other relationships. That was the big problem I had. It felt like everything was so rushed because they were trying to cram in exposition that could have easily come in one of the other 2 to 2.5 hour films that we had, the 5 hours we had before this. we could have gotten a lot of this. So that was the only real issue I had with it. Again, it felt more like a ride than a film to me. And I loved it. I will watch it. I'll probably go back to see it a third, maybe even a fourth time, and I'll watch it repeatedly when it's available to watch at home. But the fact of the matter is, I realized going into this, Dan, you and I had texted about it a little bit. I had very few expectations going into this because I know that that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And what I've realized is Star Wars for me has very little to do with the movies themselves. Yeah. Star Wars for me has always been about everything ancillary to it. You started out with the toys when I was a kid, and now it's about all the relationships that I have, the friendships that I have that are based on that started with a shared love of Star Wars. And so there was no way the film was going to disappoint me. So from that standpoint, I there wasn't really a whole lot riding on it for me, and maybe that's why my reaction was not as strong as it might have been otherwise. But again, I don't think it's a bad film. I just don't know that it's a film. I think it's fan service. I think it's a series of events. And this trilogy to me didn't feel like a trilogy. It felt like a series of standalone films that were loosely connected.
Wow. Well, Pablo Hidalgo has been very vocal on Twitter over the past week and a half that the only reason they even have a trilogy was because it was part of a contractual thing. It wasn't necessarily the original vision. And
I think that bears out when you watch the films. You know, again, I love all three of the films. I think they're great. It's great cinema, but it doesn't feel like I'm watching the same story from start to finish, because this one felt like it took a left turn and we're repaving the road as we're going, is kind of what this felt like to me. And I don't know what I would have done differently other than, like I said, introduce Palpatine at the end of The Last Jedi. But again, I still love the film. I don't want anybody to think I'm downing it or anything. I still had a great time with it. But that was my biggest disappointment, was that I didn't feel like the continuation of a story. It felt like, okay, here's what we told you so far, and now here's what's really going on.
I think that's very, very valid. I mean, like I always say, intellectual honesty and critical thinking, I think, are important.
Right.
I think to have a discerning eye is great. Whether you like it or doesn't work for you, it's all okay. It's the articulation and the thought process behind it. I mean, I can't find fault with any of your logic. Matt, do you have anything else you want to say about it?
No, that was it.
Okay, great. Matt, what about you?
I don't think Ben Solo should have died. I'm not going to fault the filmmakers for having him die and fade out of the living force into the force itself. But I think that it would have probably set it up for a far more engaging look at the relationship that he and Rey had as a dyad had he lived. Again, I don't make movies. I don't know what goes into crafting them in the creative process. But it just seems to me that I think there was more potential for the two of them going forward. Her as a Skywalker in name, him as a Skywalker by blood, and the two of them having to pick up the pieces of a galaxy that is just pretty, I would imagine at this point, pretty darn fed up by what Skywalkers do and the ramifications on their way of life. But I'm not going to fault them for the way it ended. It was a moving ending. Although that leads to my other thing. I am puzzled as to why she buried the lightsabers on Tatooine. So, especially Leia's, since she'd never really been to Tatooine. But it's neither here nor there.
Let me ask you this though, Matt. I understand where you're coming from with Ben not dying, but is there a place for him in this world now, after all that he's done? He's been the face of the First Order. Is there a place for the face of the First Order trying to rebuild a society after he's done most of the work to destroy it?
Kylo Ren was the face of the First Order, not Ben Solo.
But they have the same face.
No. Kylo Ren was the face of the First Order.
True. There's no scar.
And even then, he was only the face for a year. If you go by the time dictates of the visual dictionary for TROS. So it would be a rough road to hoe for him, because there would be a lot of antagonism toward him, and I am sure there would be numerous hits put out on him. But I think moving forward, as Dyad Jedi,
as Dyad Jedi do, yes,
yeah, I think they would have probably been able to settle and smooth things. I also think that they would have probably retreated to the unknown regions and let the galaxy exist in peace and evolve on its own, while helping to sort of every now and then when needed to step in and ensure that the balance is maintained, both for good and for bad.
I also was like, gosh, why are they? The fact that he's going to die, that would have been cool to see an animated series with Ben Solo, and it would have been amazing. But the more I think about that, the more I actually like that he dies, because again, the Shakespearean angle, but also his whole life, it seems, as long as we've been exposed to him, that he's known nothing but thinking of himself and being insecure and selfish. And he does the ultimate selfless act by giving up his life for his friends. And that's, to me, that makes him more powerful and more beautiful and more heroic. I think without that, he's just really, really cool, and we've got a lot of potential. But I think that at least for me, that's what sells him as heroic.
His death brings a complete end to the Skywalker line, the Skywalker blood.
Right. Which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. As I was just going to say that I'm with Matt, where I like I said in my point earlier, that I would like to have more of Ben Solo. I'd like to have comic books, spin-off Disney Plus series and whatever. And you can't now because he's dead. There is no more story to tell. But I'm also with you, Dan, that his death was so powerful and meaningful and heroic. And I don't know that there would have been a place for him. I mean, I think that Rey and Ben would have had to go away. I mean, it's one thing, he was forgiven by his father, who was deceased. He was forgiven by his mother, who was deceased, and then by Rey. But nobody else. I mean, are Finn and Poe going to hang out with Ben Solo? I think they might have some.
Unlikely. Yes, unlikely.
I think it would have been very difficult.
It would make definitely for very awkward encounters and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh boy! All right, so we'll get going here. Aaron, what's give us your last thoughts? Things you still want to talk about, or things that didn't work for you?
Well, the one thing that I still want to talk about and throw out there was the fact that we got to see Luke and Leia training together. I remember in the very few books that I've read from the Legends, bits and pieces of Leia being trained here and there, but I always thought it'd be fun to see that training actually happen. And I love the fact that we had that flashback moment with them on the Forest Moon, just going through their training routine. And I thoroughly enjoyed that and thought it was very unique to see that. I loved how they did that. I assume they did that similarly to how they did the Leia and Tarkin and Rogue One. I haven't read up on that, but I love how they brought that aspect in to show Leia's Jedi training, and the fact that she even had a lightsaber to begin with just was, you always think of her as she's Force power. We know she's a Skywalker, but never actually pictured in my mind Leia owning a lightsaber. But I loved how they worked that into this movie as well.
Do you have anything you want to talk about that didn't work for you? Or do you even it's okay not to have anything, of course.
Honestly, there was really not that much. There was really nothing for me that didn't work. The only thing I would have liked to seen is if it was, and it's already been brought up, if Palpatine would have been mentioned in an earlier movie to spread the storyline out a little bit, or even extending this movie. I mean, there was a lot crammed into it, and then, like I said, for me, it didn't feel like it was crammed. But I understand where a lot of people come in would say it was crammed too full. Extending it out to even a 3-hour movie would have been fine by me.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
To flesh it out even more. So that would be my only thing that may not have. I didn't say it didn't even work for me, but it's something they could have done differently.
Sure. Dave, what about you? Last minute things that you wanted to bring up, or things that didn't work for you, or both?
No, I was going to do something that didn't work. I think it did for me, and it's consistent with what kind of a theme of what everyone's talking about here towards the end and how much time. I do agree it would have been much better if it was 3 hours. We see people putting 3-hour movies out or longer. I do wish for that. The thing for me was that ending where you have Palpatine, Rey, Kylo, and the Sith Eternal all interacting. I get the ending now, watching it a second time. Like Matt, I got the visual dictionary, started to go through that, and it was incredibly helpful. Pablo talks about this dyad in the Force, and I honestly, I think because I like Randy said, drinking from a fire hose, didn't pick up on that, but really get it now. I was asking both of my kids earlier today, about the ending. What did they pick up on that? My son is 16, my daughter's 12. They didn't pick up on any of the dyad stuff. They just saw Rey defeat the Emperor. And I think back to when I was 14 in May of 83, opening night at Return of the Jedi. And there was, consistent with what almost everyone has said, there wasn't tons and tons of exposition there at the end with Vader, Luke, and the Emperor. I really got what was going on there. Again, I'm 14 at the time and I'm getting it. And it's not the changing of the plan at the very end by the Emperor, right? Initially it's, well, you need to cut me in half here or kill me, and then I'm going to go into your body. Oh, wait, you're not going to do that. There's two of you. Oh, there's a dyad. And that is a little confusing to me, particularly with the visual dictionary saying that Snoke knew that there was a dyad in the Force. And I thought that Snoke is controlled by him. And what does the Emperor say? Every voice you've ever heard is me. So that's a little confusing there. What happened? And so just like kind of, Jeff and Matt and Aaron were saying, if we had a little more time there to flush that out, or even put the Emperor at the end of The Last Jedi and give us more time in this movie. That's it. I mean, do I love it? Absolutely. And I do get the ending. I just had to do my homework a little bit, but I'm not so sure that the not so diehard fans like all of us are going to pick up on all that detail. But that's one of my nitpicks, but I love it anyways.
But my question is, when he says, I've been every voice you've heard, obviously I recognized Vader's voice, but what was that voice in the middle that was very, very loud? Was that supposed to be Snoke, or was that supposed to be Darth Maul? I didn't recognize, couldn't quite place who it was.
I thought it was Snoke.
I think it's Snoke.
Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, that would make sense.
Yeah, he was
Right.
Snoke and Vader. I don't know who else he would have heard.
Right.
Andy Serkis got the credit as his voice in the credits.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
That's cool. That's good. All right. Let's see. Cory, is your mic working? I think Cory has a bad connection. So Tom, maybe. Tom and Cory have been texting me over the past 10 minutes saying, Cory, don't take my last point. So it looks like the Force is with you, Tom. So Cory's not going to get a chance to take your point. So go ahead.
Well, when he texted me and said he's going rapid fire, I thought, oh boy, here we go.
Maybe you're behind everything and not the Emperor, since you disconnected.
Maybe. Well, I my last item is kind of both a number 3 for me, as well as something that it's not that it didn't work for me, it's just that it wasn't there. And that is that I loved I just really enjoyed the heroes of the Resistance. We haven't talked about them very much, that being Finn and Poe and the droids and all of those characters. I really liked the sort of Steve Rogers, Tony Stark bickering between Finn and Poe Dameron. I thought that was, I thought it was meant to be fun and give them some character and show that, there's not necessarily one solid voice, although it's given to Poe Dameron to be the commander, but then he turns in a very, I thought, nice tip of the hat, as well as kind of an emotional moment where he says, well, I can't do this unless we're going to give the same rank to Finn. And I thought that was really cool. So that's my third, but then my what I wish I had more of was them. I mean, in the trailer, we're given this beautiful shot of this ragtag fleet where the Falcon drops down and you have, I mean, how many of us, tell me that all of us did not analyze through some type of a zoom in on all of those ships to see if we could find ships from Legends, from Rebels, from Resistance, how cool was that? I wanted more of that battle. I just felt like that battle was really shortchanged. Obviously we had some very serious stuff happening down on the planet, but I also felt like the heroes of the Resistance and as well as the heroes, I suppose you want to call them, of the First Order, I thought that they didn't get their due in that final battle. And so I just wanted more of that. And I forget who someone just said, I could have gone I would have been fine if this movie had been 3 hours. And if that's where the 3 hours came, was in more of that space battle, I would be all for it.
Oh, wow. Well, that's cool. What, Cory? Is your thing working again?
It's back. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, that's okay. Tom may have taken all your stuff.
Well, and that's the funny thing, because Tom, just before we got back on, Tom said, "Don't take all my ideas or all my thoughts." And I said, "I'm going to do them all." So eventually, the internet with the force has compelled me to restart my internet. So I'm going to just kind of rapid fire some of my dislikes, and you guys can chime in if you want to. The news of Palpatine's return, the dark science thing, cloning things, just was a hard pressed turn for me. Like, the news, people were like, "Oh yeah, okay, that makes a bunch of sense. He's back, cool." It wasn't like this. I felt like the whole Resistance took that as a good thing, or as kind of like it's like meant to be type thing. Finn's secret, he dropped talking to Rey, warned her a couple times, like, "Hey, I got something going on." We kind of alluded to it earlier. That was like, maybe that's a force sensitive thing, which I think they brought up too. I think that's a little more plausible. But still, it just really wasn't cemented enough for me. The billion Resistance ships that showed up, like, super late to the battle. Like, I hate that fact that, like, we're waiting on you. All of a sudden, like, we send a billion ships. I'm like, why don't you just send them in bursts? We're waiting for an Avengers event here that everybody has to show up at the same time. That kind of drove me nuts a little bit. I just wanted it to happen. I want to have a big space battle. I think Tom was mentioning that a little bit there at the end. Hux being the spy. I don't know. That was kind of dumb. It didn't work for me. And then the fact that he just got blasted and it was like, he's done, gone. I was like, well, that's kind of a throwaway character. The fake on Chewie's death and the second transport, like, instantly, I know my kids were kind of their hands over their faces, and they're like, "No, what the heck?" Obviously it's the trick of storytelling and trick of the way it was going to be. Getting you kind of that emotion built up in you, and of course he's perfectly fine. They're not going to kill off Chewie. And I think that was kind of a cop out a little bit. And then for the last thing was the secret final order sending out a warning of like 48 hours until they started blasting planets, and every ship they had was a planet killing alternate weapon, and we'll give everybody a last chance to like build up resistance if they want to. Like, why are they waiting? What's going on here? Why do you have to wait to bring up your ultimate weapon? Is there a certain reason? I don't know. It seemed like a lot of those plot points could have been tightened up. I think we mentioned too that The Last Jedi had a lot of those plot points kind of built in, and kind of give us a wholesome story, more kind of a longer range of what they're going for. And then one last thought that I had as far as wanting more Ben Solo. I felt like the Marvel comic that just came out, I think it's called The Rise of Kylo Ren, but I would expect to have a little Ben Solo in that before he takes to the mantle of Kylo Ren. So there are my issues with the film, but I can kind of see past those and still make it another round if I want to go see it again.
Sure. Oh yeah. Wow. Okay, so it's I'm running off this thing. The main points of some of our analytical pieces, as I've been saying, we'll be getting into those throughout the next few months. We've done a nice, wonderful overview of things, had some great perspectives and ideas, and that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk with all of you about the Rise of Skywalker. I'm going to echo what a lot of you have said. Rey's lineage did not work for me at all, and I can honestly say through all 11 Star Wars films that have been out there, while there may have been things that didn't work for me as far as how they were told, or maybe wooden dialogue in some sections of some movies or things like that, I've never had a moment where I thought, I don't like how the mythology is being used here, being treated here. I like midichlorians. I like pretty much everything as far as the mythology aspect of Star Wars and the way things are connected. But Rey being a Palpatine just doesn't sit well with me. If anything, I love every time Rey is on screen. I think, especially when she's on there with Kylo/Ben, I think it's wonderful. But her being a Palpatine kind of makes me think it's a step to the side. A thing I heard a little bit at the premiere was, well, this movie was a slap in the face to The Last Jedi. I completely disagree with that. In fact, I've got a lot of reasons to think why it actually adds to the legacy of The Last Jedi, although not told to the degree that it was. In fact, I think this was the least J.J. Abrams film I've ever seen. I still think it looked beautiful, and I still think it was shot beautifully, but it didn't feel as cohesive to me. This didn't feel like the end of 42 years of Star Wars storytelling. This felt like the end of a season of a Disney Plus series or a Netflix series. And I don't mean that as a negative, but it didn't feel like the end of a sweeping cinematic 42-year experience. Just the Jedi stuff on its own, absolutely. But anytime we were on screen where we didn't have a Skywalker, whether it's Leia or Luke or Ben or Rey, I felt like it was just fine. It was fine. It was good, but it didn't blow me away. I was really disappointed with Finn as far as the fact that, he had these romantic connections, or there's like this tension with him and Rose, completely gone, as was Rose. Where was she in this film? I mean, she was definitely denigrated to the background, which I think is a disservice to her. And then, they mentioned a couple of times he's going to tell Rey something, and we never find out what that is. I mean, it's completely ignored over the last hour of the movie, and I really struggle with that. I don't love that. And I also think while Dio is cute and voiced by J.J. Abrams, I don't really know why he was there. Why didn't we give R2-D2 or BB-8 those moments? I just didn't really quite get that. And I don't mean for it to sound harsh. I mean, I do enjoy this movie a lot, but there's some things there that I just think, I don't know. I'm just really struggling with Rey being a Palpatine. I just don't know that was necessary. Palpatine is great, and I'm glad that he was in it. And I heard personally, I was in the room when JJ said it was always the intent from the beginning of The Force Awakens to bring Palpatine into this by episode 9. So that's good. But I don't know. I'm just not really sure how to circumvent the fact that he was pulling the strings the entire time. I don't really think that was necessary. I think, while I'm not necessarily a Snoke fan, I think it would have been okay for Snoke just to be a bad guy and not necessarily something that Palpatine did. So I don't know. Anybody want to weigh in on any of that before we wrap this up?
No, I agree. I think, like I said, the whole Rey Palpatine thing is just odd to me because it just, like I said, just came out
unnecessary.
I don't understand that. And mentioning Rose, that was something else I was thinking about too. Is they introduced the character of Jannah, who I liked. I thought she was cool. I didn't quite get her point to being introduced into the film. But at the end, during the battle, where Jannah is helping Finn take out, the capital ship and that, and Rose is there.
Yeah.
It could have been done by Rose.
Yeah.
Instead, Finn tells her, no, go. Go with, the Hobbit, Dominic Monaghan, and go do your thing. It's like, why isn't Rose? I mean, Rose, and I love Dominic Monaghan, but that could have been Rose. I don't know. I really didn't get bringing Jannah into that, but I I mean, what can you do?
Right. And I don't expect anything to change or be different, and I'm not going to wail and gnash my teeth together. I mean, it's not that important. It's just supposed to be fun. It's fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I'll make peace with it as time goes on. I'm sure some of the other things that we'll read will sort of flesh it out for me. And it is what it is. You know, I learned back in 1999, temper your expectations and just sort of take whatever happens and just kind of process it and run with it, because you're supposed to have fun. I had fun with this movie with my family and my friends, and talking about it with each of you, and then with friends online. So it's all good. I just don't think it's a perfect movie, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be a perfect. There's only been a handful of perfect movies in the history of cinema, and that's okay.
I have one more thought, Dan. I don't know if you want to do this for the group, but this was brought up by one of my kids, and maybe you guys have the similar feelings. And maybe you could just do a yes/no. But will there be an episode 10?
Yes. Not for a long time, but there will be, I think.
Yes, I agree too.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have. Dave, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to back up what you said. I just don't get Dio. I love the increased use of C-3PO. That was awesome. Again, from, sitting there in the theater back in 1977. Wanted more R2-D2. But between C-3PO, R2-D2, and BB-8, that's a perfect amount. I just don't get his purpose in this. And they had 142 minutes. And I think you said more R2. I agree wholeheartedly.
Matt, what do you think?
But Dio makes a really nice little decorative pillow I have on my bed.
Well, that's the very important thing as well.
I like
Matt.
I think it was fun.
Matt, what were you going to say?
I like Dio, but that exists solely for to sell remote control robots.
Yes.
Yes, on episode 10. I think there will be an episode 10.
I do too. Tom, were you going to say something before because we got a pretty big announcement we need to discuss. But Tom, what were you going to say?
Oh, I'll just make it very quick then. A lot of your things go right along with what I was saying about I wanted more Resistance, more Dio, more Rose, more Janna, more Zori Bliss. I just wanted more of that. And I'm not convinced on an episode 10.
Interesting. Well, thank you to all of you for coming on and for sharing your thoughts on the Rise of Skywalker. We had a lot of ground to cover. I think we did a great job with an overview. And the good news is the conversation continues. But we have a pretty major announcement for the future of Coffee with Kenobi and our Coffee with Kenobi network going forward. It's with a heavy heart that I'm announcing to everyone that as of December 31st, we will no longer be a network. And this was a really, really tough decision. We've been talking about it for a while. But ultimately, what it came down to was these shows, when Randy came to me and proposed Legends Library, when Matt came to me and said he wanted to do the Star Wars comic book podcast, when I went to Aaron at Walt Disney World and said, hey, I'd love you to take over Rebels Reactions. And then I said, hey, I think you should have Dave as a co-host. When all these things happened, we were building these shows because we wanted to give people a voice. And while we gave the platform, these incredible people took their shows and their formats and made them grow and shine in incredible, wonderful, thought-provoking ways. And I could not be more impressed or proud of all of you as podcasters, as critical thinkers, and just as good people. So we've kind of reached the point where when these events happen, celebrations, Comic-Cons, what have you, if you have a giant umbrella with a bunch of shows underneath it, then typically what happens is not everybody gets a chance to do their thing and to shine. And that was starting to hurt my heart quite a bit. And I just was thinking about it, and I just thought, you know what? Maybe it's time for us all to go our separate ways while still being arm in arm together, or hand in hand like Poe and 3PO and Finn and Rey on the Falcon, so that they can just do their own thing with all the power behind them of who they are as individuals. So we are, as I said, we're gonna disband the network, but we're not disbanding our friendships or the communication. You're going to hear all of our voices on all of our respective shows. Amy and Drea could not be with us tonight, obviously, or you would have heard their voices by now. But they're fully on board with this as well, and send their encouragement and friendship and support to this wonderful network of people that I'm proud to call friends. And I can't thank all of you enough for all you've done for me, for Coffee with Kenobi, and for fandom. And while we won't have a network per se, we will always be friends. And I can't wait to toast to each of you and give you guys a hug the next time I see you, for sure.
Hear, hear.
Cheers.
So let's just Randy, go ahead and weigh in on this and let us know about the future of Legends Library.
Okay. Well, it's been, being a fan of every single one of your shows. It has been just really cool to be a part of this podcasting family. And one of the things that I have tried to do as a host is just kind of, I'm hoping that I've done this is to follow Dan and Cory's lead, and they were gracious enough to give Luke and I a chance to learn how to podcast, kind of learn on the job kind of thing. We didn't know what we were doing. I feel very confident as a podcaster now, and I've learned a ton. And that was really Dan and Cory giving two listeners an opportunity to express their fandom and to become hosts. And at Legends Library, Luke and I are doing the same. We are giving two of our listeners the opportunity to host Legends Library. So as the Coffee with Kenobi network comes to a close, as a thing, Legends Library continues on. I'll still be involved in Legends Library, but we're going to have two new hosts. My life right now is kind of crazy with a ton of personal stuff going on, and so it's going to be an opportunity for me to kind of take a break and to let two very gifted and very intelligent hosts and Star Wars fans kind of take Legends Library to the next level and allow me to kind of consider some of my next steps as a podcaster. And so that's where we're going with Legends Library is it continues on with the next two podcasters, Lisa Mountain and Cole Peel. They've been longtime listeners and they've been co-hosts for a while now. And I'm so blessed and so honored to be a part of what Dan and Cory started and to follow their example by giving other people a voice. And so, we're just trying to be the good Padawan and to follow, or the good Jedi and follow our masters. So that's what we're doing.
Well, it's been an honor serving alongside you. You certainly helped me a ton with my audio here in the studio and just your friendship and support. And I thank you so much, Randy.
Oh, it's been fun. Thank you, Dan.
Let's turn it over to Matt and Jeff. Matt, I remember the first time Matt reached out to me and I saw his byline and I looked him up. I'm like, wow, this guy has got it. He has got it together. He's incredibly credentialed. He's got an incredible body of work. And then I read his writing and I thought, wow. And the fact that you wanted to have a show about comics on Coffee with Kenobi's network, I thought was such a boon for us. And then of course you and Jeff met, and that chemistry between the two of you is just absolute gold. I mean, that's pretty clear even on this show. So talk to us about the end of the network and where Comics with Kenobi is going forward.
I'm going to wait for Jeff to chime in, but I don't think he's chiming in. No. Well, what we plan on doing, I'll speak for both of us, as is usual. We've had a lot of fun since we joined it up. And as a matter of fact, Jeff and I didn't actually meet each other for, we'd been doing the podcast for about 2 years. Then we finally started meeting each other. But so what we're doing is we're going to continue our podcast as well. We are going to be changing the name, though, from Comics with Kenobi to Star Wars splash page, which of course is an industry term, for comics, which is the splash page, which is typically like when you open up a comic book, you have the splash page, which is this one full page of art and action and detail and dialogue. So that should be taking effect around the turn of the new year. We will institute legacy numbering, so it'll essentially go from Comics with Kenobi 152 to the Star Wars splash page number 153, and we've already started making changes on social media to that effect as well. With Twitter, and then we're in the process of negotiating with Facebook to change the name from Comics with Kenobi to Star Wars splash page as well. Then
I'm back, Matt. Did you tell them Facebook is being stupid?
I did. Yeah. Actually, I didn't say they were being stupid. I just said they were being disagreeable.
Well, mine. Sorry, guys. Matt, we may have a problem because none of my gear wants to work now. I had to call in on my phone. So this may be the end of our comic show.
Wow, what a run!
Well, it's everything we're doing
solo. Yeah.
So we will become the Star Wars splash page, and nothing beyond that out of that will change except for the name. And we're in the process of commissioning some new art for our banners on Twitter and Facebook, and we're looking forward to as Marvel moves into its second phase of Star Wars comics, and we like to think we're moving into the second phase of covering those Star Wars comics.
It'll actually be Star Wars splash page : Comics in Review. That'll be the full title. So if anybody just looks up Star Wars comics, they'll find us.
I love it. Well, again, I can't thank you both enough for sharing your talents, your considerable talents with us, and taking us through these comic books week after week. It's been an absolute joy.
Yeah, we've enjoyed it. We've had a good time doing it.
And I've had fun learning how to read comics.
And learning how to read, period.
Baby steps, Jeff. Baby steps.
Yeah.
We'll get to you.
Wonderful. Well, now let's turn it over to Aaron and Dave. Aaron, I'll never forget when I talked to you. It was actually in that, well, now it's Starbucks, but in the coffee shop on Main Street at Walt Disney World. I'll never forget the look on your face when I asked you if you wanted to take over. Rebels Reactions was, of course, migrated to Resistance Reactions. You had a rotating series of hosts, guest co-hosts with you. Randy certainly had a great run on there as well. But ultimately, you and Dave was on a lot, and you guys had great chemistry. And then we all agreed that was the right way to go. And it's really turned out amazing. Your guys' enthusiasm and consistency has certainly been great. So talk to us about kind of the future of your show.
Well, thanks. It's a little bit bittersweet because Coffee with Kenobi's been huge in my fandom for years now. If it wasn't for Coffee with Kenobi and covering Star Wars weekends back when I was at the beginning, I never would have met Dave. It was because of that. And so it's always meant a big part of life for me. So it's a little bittersweet that it's coming to an end, but we're still going to be doing Resistance Reactions. We're going to follow it through till the end. It should go through the end of January, maybe the first week of February. But we're going to follow that up with a new show that we're still working out some details on. Changing a little bit of, still covering shows as they come out, but shifting a little bit more and doing it a little more discussion and stuff as well on top of that. But we're still working out some details, so there's still a lot more to come on that. But we're really excited for the opportunity. It's going to be definitely a change of pace for us because TV show we do 20 shows, then we're off for the rest of the year. So we're going to be picking up the pace a little bit, and it's going to be the future is wide open, and that's what's exciting about it. David, was there anything you wanted to say?
No, I just want to say thanks to Dan and to Cory for the opportunity, and for you, Aaron, to have me come on. I know you and Dan were persistent on it. I appreciate you guys doing that and having me on. And what a joy to be able to talk Star Wars with you guys. It's just been such a blessing to me. And so I just want to make sure I give a big thank you to my brothers and my sister Lisa up there in Illinois.
It's been an absolute pleasure, guys. We appreciate it so very much. Well, Lisa is still stuck. You're stuck, right?
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, that's
I'm
good.
Here. I've help. I'm hostage. No, just kidding. Somebody else.
I love it. And Tom, of course, is still our CWK newsman. Cory's going to be a frequent guest. That's all of our friends here on in the Coffee with Kenobi Network. It's been a joy. What an incredible 2019 has been for Star Wars, for Coffee with Kenobi, for all these wonderful shows, for Legends Library, for Resistance Reactions, for Comics with Kenobi. It's been a blast. Everybody, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your thoughts on the Rise of Skywalker. We're going to go ahead and close this out. The rest of the year is going to be my mythology students will be bringing you their features where they're looking at different segments of Star Wars through our mythology class. Very excited to share that with each of you. And then, of course, we got to review the last couple episodes of The Mandalorian and the finale. And those are going to come out after the beginning of 2020. So on behalf of myself, Randy, Lisa, Dave, Aaron, Tom, Cory, Matt, and Jeff, thank you all so much for joining us. Have a wonderful, happy, safe, and Merry Christmas, and we will talk to you very soon. Until next time, this is the podcast you're looking for.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are the podcast you're looking for. This is
As we close out the show, I want to thank our CWK sponsors, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel and One Nation Coffee. Please support them the way they support our podcast. And remember to listen to new and archive shows of Coffee with Kenobi wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, CastBox, Deezer, and our website, www.coffeewithkenobi.com, or wherever you enjoy listening to your favorite shows. And if you listen to the show through iTunes, please leave us a review. You can also find us on social media. In fact, please follow us on Twitter and Instagram, give us a like on Facebook, and check us out on Pinterest. Be sure to listen to our CWK family of shows too, including Legends Library, Resistance Reactions, Comics with Kenobi, and Lattes with Leia. Please leave a review for each of their shows as well, and be sure to subscribe to each of them individually on their own respective feeds. In addition to the places I just mentioned for Coffee with Kenobi, you can find me twice a month on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, as well as on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR, and you can find my writing on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com and IGN. Don't forget to check out www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi to support our podcast and help us keep the lights on in the studios. Our Patreon page is where you can listen to our exclusive weekly podcast, CWK Pour Over, hosted by me, CWK newsman Tom Gross, and Coffee with Kenobi co-founder Cory Clubb for just $5 a month. There are also opportunities for behind-the-scenes videos, photos, t-shirts, and more. Plus, 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to St. Jude Children's Hospital each month. Thank you to all of you currently supporting us on Patreon, and thank you for considering becoming a member of our Coffee with Kenobi Patreon family.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along. Move along.